All right, welcome everyone. So great turnout. Nice to see everyone down your way over to the School of Nursing. So my name is Mark Hughes. I co-chair the Hospital Ethics Committee with Cinder Rushton. And this is our October ethics for lunch. We'll talk about the details of that in a bit, but I'll first just do some logistics with CME. So just show you those. To let you know that this is an accredited conference and designated for one AMA credit. If you're interested in CME credits, we will provide you disclosures of any conflicts of interest. Our general objectives are an opportunity for the hospital community to come together to talk about clinical care, especially as it pertains to ethical issues. It looks like we've got a timer on the slides. We don't anticipate that any off-label use of medication will be discussed. So you don't have to worry about that, but if it happens, we will let you know. Our general objectives are to really just help with thinking about patient care, any new strategies in communication, etc. Mentioned that we do have this disclosure policy. Nobody today has any financial interests to let you know about. Today we're going to be talking about organ donation, specifically about first-person authorization, review what the Uniform Anatomical Give Act is about. And I'm going to have to probably stop the presentation from going forward. Do you know if it's also for? There we go. It's also for the rest of the presentation. So we're going to talk about communication strategies, especially when there might be conflict with regard to thinking about organ donation. And then these are all hypothetical cases that we discuss in Ethics for Lunch, sometimes based on real cases, but we try to make them confidential. If we do actually talk about any particular patients, we expect everyone to maintain the confidentiality of what's discussed with regard to that. And if you're interested in the CME credits, the text number 844-980-1555, and the code for today is 57921. So just text that. I'll keep it up for a minute for those that are interested. Okay. And if you need more information, you can go to the CME website. All right, so while I fix the timing on the slides, I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves. We'll just start with Jeff Natterman. You can just go down the line.
Hello, everybody. Jeff Natterman. I'm the Chief Risk Officer for Johns Hopkins Hospital and Senior Counsel for the Health System, also a member of the Johns Hopkins Hospital Ethics Committee. Glad to be here, and thank you all for coming.
Hey everyone, my name is Anna Alish. I'm the organ donation coordinator at Hopkins. I echo Jeff's thanks for coming.
Good afternoon. My name is Kenny Boyd. I'm the Vice President and Chief Business Development Officer for Infinite Legacy, currently designated working procurement organization that services this hospital. And it's a pleasure to be here today.
Good afternoon. I'm Pamela Sitt. I'm from the Department of Surgery. And in this role, I am the Organ Donor Council Chair.
And thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Karen Kennedy. I'm the VP of External Affairs for Infinite Legacy, where I partner with Kenny and Anna and all of you to help provide donation services. Thank you.
Great. So we're going to have the panelists react to a case. I will read the case and also have you think about it as you're hearing the story and how, if you were, a clinician involved or a family member of a similar situation, how you would try to think through the case itself. So, as I said, these are our objectives, and here is CF. A 23-year-old recent college graduate, eagerly awaiting a job opportunity. In the interim, he has been working as a delivery driver to support himself and pay off his student loans. He's the oldest of 3 siblings. His siblings are 21 and 19 years old. And he's known for his vibrant personality, his love of the outdoors, an active lifestyle. He played on his college volleyball team and had a passion for dancing. Tragically, he was involved in a severe motor vehicle accident while on duty as a delivery driver. The driver ran a red light and collided with his vehicle, resulting in significant trauma. EMTs, emergency medical technicians, arrived on the scene, and he was in asystolic cardiac arrest. We're going to turn on some lights so people can see each other. The volume, okay, thank you. Can people hear okay? Okay. So asystolic cardiac arrest, due to extensive damage of the vehicle, fire department had to extricate him by cutting open the car doors, leading to prolonged extrication process. So there was a delay in initiating CPR. He was down for a total of 45 minutes. During that resuscitation, he was intubated to secure his airways. He was then transported to the emergency department. He was stabilized hemodynamically and then transferred to the neurologic critical care unit. CT scan revealed significant midline shift and severe traumatic brain injury. To prevent any additional brain injury, the NCCU team induced a coma, and he was in that coma for 2 weeks, but once sedation was stopped, he really showed no purposeful movements or responses to stimuli. Neurologic assessments indicated a very low level of brain activity, and imaging confirmed extensive brain damage. So he, at this point, remains fully dependent on life-sustaining treatments, including mechanical ventilation and medications, and the clinical team feels he has a great prognosis for meaningful recovery. That consists of neurologists, neurosurgeons, critical care specialists, and they've closely monitored his condition over these weeks. After thorough evaluations, the medical team has concluded that his neurologic injuries are severe and irreversible. They've determined that further aggressive medical interventions, including life-sustaining treatments, would be unlikely to make any improvement in his condition. So they feel that his injuries are incompatible with a meaningful quality of life. They approach the family, initiate clinical care conversations, including the possibility of compassionate extubation as part of end-of-life care options. At the meeting, a large family meeting, and it is a large family, parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, siblings, cousins, and friends, all gathered present for this family meeting. Parents are serving as the legally authorized decision makers. This family appears to understand the grave prognosis, and knowing the patient's preferences, lifestyle, and values, they opt to withdraw life-sustaining treatments. They rely on their faith to make the decision, and they do not wish their loved ones to be in pain or suffering. And based on hospital protocols, Infinite Legacy is contacted. They're the organ organization, as we've heard, and they're introduced to the family to discuss organ donation as one of the end-of-life options. Family Services Coordinator from Infinite Legacy meets with the family, approaches them for organ donation. Family Services Coordinator discloses to the family that the patient was a designated donor as per his driver's license, and it serves as a first person authorization for organ donation. Further explains that it is time for the family to honor the patient's expressed wishes through this first person authorization, and the organ procurement organization does not require consent from the family because the patient has already given it on driver's license. The family is in shock. His father feels that it is his fault that he influenced his son to say yes to organ donation when that was questioned at the Motor Vehicle Administration, and the son registered himself as an organ donor. The family's reaction, their opposition to donation after circulatory death, stems from their understanding of organ donation occurring only after brain death. While they were generally supportive of organ donation, they assumed it would be post-mortem, meaning after a clear declaration of death, not while the patient is still being supported by life-sustaining treatment. This distinction has caused confusion and distress, especially as the family now faces the reality of organ donation while their loved one is still exhibiting bodily signs of life, such as breathing over the ventilator. He has some pupillary activity, slight coughing, withdraws to pain, but really no other purposeful movements. This raises profound religious and ethical dimensions for the dilemmas for the family as they perceive their decision to withdraw life-sustaining treatment as potentially terminating life in order to give life to someone else. So furthermore, organ donation following death by circulatory criteria forces the family to question what true comfort, peace, and meaningful closure for their son would look like in this situation. They also believe that the patient's designation would only take effect upon or after death, as we've talked about, and they feel that their legal rights have been undermined. Additionally, the family is distraught with the fact that it might take 3 or 4 days for compassionate extubation, which would occur in an operating room, and only limited number of family members might be able to be present. Moreover, the patient's bodily functions will be supported during that time. The family is petrified that this will prolong the suffering for the patient and for them as the family. So that's the situation. A family that's distraught. Patient who designated himself as organ donor, and they want to move ahead with that process. Let me turn to the panel and see what the reactions to the case from your perspective are. Dr. Lipset, do you want to go first?
Always happy to go first. First of all, the emotion and reality of this case, I think, rings true. The angst of the family, their anger, their dealing with the imminent death of their vibrant son is truly a tragedy. And it feels real to me. Certainly, I didn't mention I'm a co-director of 2 of the ICUs in surgery, not this one, but the other 2. So this feels real. What also feels real is that things didn't go the way I would want them to. Certainly, patient autonomy is really important, but the delicacy and timing of addressing some of these issues and how they were addressed, or at least how it seems to me they were addressed, doesn't feel quite right. First, I don't think it's up to the ICU team to ever determine what is or is not quality of life. They certainly could say that he would never return to the person that he was, but I was immediately put off by that statement, though I believe it's a realistic statement that somebody might make. And then the timing of, how do I see that IL, certainly we want to hear from our colleagues at IL, is, I think as in brain death, we often have what we call decoupling between when a family is notified of death and when of brain death, and when we subsequently have any future discussion about donation. And they need to process the death. And in this case, I'm disturbed by what seems to be a rather immediate movement from a decision to withdraw life-sustaining therapy to a discussion of, look, he's a donor, we need to move forward with that. The family needs to grapple with the fact that they have made this momentous decision. They need some time. What is the right amount of time? I think only the team who's been caring for the patient really knows what the right time is, which is why there has to be a collaborative, and there is, a collaborative huddle about when we should move forward with this discussion. Certainly, from an autonomy standpoint, if the patient has declared their indication to be a donor, I think that's incredibly important. But there are so many misunderstandings in this case about when donation will occur, how it will occur, the circumstances. There are many, many things that we can meet, and I think I'll pass it over to Penny to talk about really IL and research and authorization and
Sure, thank you, everyone, and we look forward to the discussion. We do have several framing slides that provide a little bit of background about the work we do. And I know it's a testament to Anna and Dr. Lipset and everything involved that Hopkins culture of supporting donation and that collaboration. And Pam, it did strike me as well when we were preparing and as we were speaking, and I imagine for all, not most of you, it feels real. You know, this is a case that, we can all think about that we've been involved in. We think about families and right for all of us, it's in the case related to donation is honoring the autonomy of someone who's made the decision to be a donor, which we call first person authorization, and caring for the family. It's always an and that really resonates for us. And so, if I may, we just talk a little bit about definitions. I'll, continue the discussion. So, definitions. So, organ donation. There are generally two ways. There's organ donation that occurs after the declaration of neurologic death, brain death. The other pathway is donation after circulatory death. And I imagine I see some familiar faces. A number of you have collaborated with us on donation cases. So donation after circulatory death is, and in both cases, donation occurs after the death is declared, right? In the brain death scenario, brain death is declared, and the donor management and all those priorities that unfold. And then we go to the recovery. Donation after circulatory death is essentially similar. There is going to be a declaration of death. In this case, it's after the withdrawal of life-sustaining therapies. There is preparation to be done to prepare to honor that gift after the declaration of death in the PACU or the operating room. We can talk a little bit about where that occurs. Both are predicated on the patient being on the ventilator. And you heard us mention in the case scenario, so first person authorization or FPA is in the Maryland statute. In fact, it's in the statutes across the United States. And you make your call different things. It is, I have made a decision that I would like to be a donor. I've documented that either at the MBA. Maryland has an online registry that actually also connects to the MBA. Perhaps it's an advanced directive, a living will. I have made a decision to donate. It's an autonomous decision that is, all agree important to honor and take care of the family. And it has a legal basis in the statute. And then we're talking about the ethics and other aspects of that as well. I'm going to pause here, or we can go wherever.
Well, maybe, Anna, you could speak to, as the Family Services Coordinator, how you would initiate these conversations with the family once you determine that the person might be an organ donor.
Sure. Like many of you have echoed, this is a case that really feels real. I think we've all been there. So in my role, what I would, as the organ donation coordinator, would be to, when I get that initial referral, to do a really thorough assessment to make sure that there is suitability and candidacy for donation after circulatory death. So that would mean if we knew when that end of life meeting would be, I would come to the unit and I would ask to do some sort of spontaneous breathing trial, an updated neuro assessment, look at their hemodynamics, what kind of pressors and other drips they're on, to be able to ascertain to the best of our ability if we think that this patient would pass within 2 hours. So first and foremost, we're looking at suitability to make sure that there truly is a good fit. And then my role is really to liaise with Infinite Legacy at this point and to make sure that we have the right people in the right place at the right time. So it's imperative that we get the referral early so that I can complete this assessment, and that if it is appropriate to offer a donation, especially in this capacity, that we have somebody on site, a family services coordinator, who can be present to huddle with the teams. Because like my colleagues have already alluded to, end of life gets really complicated. And a lot of times families aren't just ready to have this conversation immediately after making the decision to remove life-sustaining therapies from their loved one. It really takes something to come up with that decision. So working with the team, having that family services coordinator present so that they can learn from the family advocates, where is this family at. They can huddle with, our colleagues from palliative care, our primary team to figure out and coordinate and navigate when would be the best time, to have that next conversation.
So you might, if this, CF was in the ICU for 2 weeks plus, somewhere along those 2 weeks, you're gathering this information, coordinating with, the clinical team.
Yep. If the patient meets the clinical criteria, our ICU staff are wonderful at making that referral. I'll monitor that patient from afar. A lot of the referrals that we get, we end up signing off on for whatever reason. And it could be that we have you guys reach out to say, hey, an end of life conversation is going to be coming. So I like to do this. Can you hear me? I like to be able to perform this assessment to determine candidacy for donation after circulatory death in a timely manner. So if we know that the meeting is happening, today at 3 p.m., if I can go to the unit earlier in the day, preferably before the family has arrived, to do that assessment so we can all be on the same page. And I always invite the medical team to be present because typically we all kind of come to the same conclusion at the end of that assessment.
And Dr. Lipset had mentioned the timing of when they've made the decision for withdrawal of the life-sustaining treatment and when they might be approached about organ donation. Is there any guideline or rule about, is it immediately after? Is it maybe the next day? What sort of time do they have to sort of process?
That's a great question. Sorry, this sounds like it's going in and out for me. I really rely heavily on our family advocate coordinators for that and for the medical team. We want to make sure that donation is just one end of life decision, right? And so we want to make sure that it's offered appropriately. So we give them enough time to kind of ensure that they have kind of come to an understanding with that initial decision, but not too much time that they have now made plans and are getting their family here and they're ready to remove the therapies too, because we want to be really careful at navigating when it is to have that conversation. I don't have a great answer for you. It's really working together and that teamwork and that collaboration to find what is best.
Please.
Two things important in this venue. The manner in which patients are referred to Infinite Legacy is consistent and codified in policy. So it's not governed on who's a registered donor. Let's move that patient forward. That's really important. We stand in line with the care team and taking guidance from them in these cases. And then for Infinite Legacy and DCD scenarios where a family is entitled to that opportunity to either choose donation or honor the wishes of their loved one, our ethical line is the family makes an independent decision to withdraw support in life-sustaining care before we will engage with them about donation.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important point. And there is some time necessary for them to make that decision and then consider how to proceed after that. But there's no bright white line of time. Every family is different, every situation is different. And in that 2 weeks, in this case, you should come to know that family and where they are in the process. The anger displayed in this case suggests to me there wasn't enough time. And that's why I said that I thought the timing wasn't right. But I think there is no bright white line that says this is the right time or 20 minutes later is the right time. It really requires everyone who's involved in the care of the patient to be talking and making a decision about now is the right time.
The other definition I just wanted to make sure we got to was the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act. Do you want to speak to that, Karen?
Sure, here, so this is in the Maryland statute, and again, it's in statutes across the United States. There are just several highlights. So the individual, the right to do so and the autonomy to do so, and that would be honored. And then that it's called the document of gift. So whether it's the driver's license or on the registry or an advance directive. I think if I may, one of the, I know there's a lot to talk about with respect to the family and timing, and we look forward to speaking about this. At this point, I would like to say, For some families, depending on the situation, every situation is unique. They may have known their loved one was designated, perhaps they did not. In either case, for some, having that tangible documented gift, because we can print that, and it gives the detailed information about when they had signed up to be a donor, and actually the location too, which can help families. Understandably, for some families, my loved one would have told me if, they had, so, and we understand that. So being able to gently, in all of this, as Pam and Ann and everyone's describing, we all go together on this journey with this family, right? Because every situation is unique. So you may hear us talk about the documented gift, and that's what that is, that tangible representation. And that others are barred from overriding that decision, and is that autonomous decision. And I think we'll talk in just a few minutes how we navigate that working together with the hospital. And time, right? Time is such an important tangible in all this. So the time we're talking about now, which has to do with is the family ready and what that looks like. One of the elements of the work that we do in support with all of you is likewise to recognize and understand, and you all know the family, in this case, you've had a relationship with them for some time, is to be in the journey with them, to pause, to answer questions, to exactly want to listen to them. And sometimes it's just time. In our experience, this is very rare in our work, in all of our service area, where there is potentially an initial opposition to donation. And what we see and understand is often that's to what you all are saying, like, stop, I can't, like, assimilating this, I'm losing my son, this is, every family is different. In this scenario, we also talk about timing, when for some families, having more time after they made the decision to withdraw is helpful. So on the donation part of the journey and preparing to be able to go to the operating room for the recovery, we can accelerate that time. If a family, like, they gather, families come in from another state, whatever, we're on a journey together with the family and all of you. And I think it also, us all here together and you all, communication is a word we use a lot, and it is because it's important, like having huddles and that good communication among all of us in support of that donor and family.
We'll take some questions.
Sorry, I have to ask the first question. I think there is two sides of the coin, and the truth is always two sides. Irrespective, the perspective of the care teams or the OPOs, you're looking from your lens that there is a potential opportunity here. And the anger of the family, for me, if I put myself as a family member, as a support services coming from compassionate pastoral services, their anger is not because what is being conveyed, rather they are happy that they are coming to a place where they are looking for a meaningful closure. The focus to be on their loved one rather than, you do this, there is something else coming out. I think their anger is triggered on the notion that whatever you cared so far, it seems to appear that this care is for someone else, not for my loved one. And that's my perception. And the other way of it is that if legally you have the rights as per the FPA, and why do the families need to sign a consent process which reads, I authorize the OPO, and the family member needs to sign? I think that there is a disconnect when you read that language for a family member. Still, I am authorizing. So if you have the legal right, why there is a legal consent to be signed by a family again?
So I'll take two questions. I'll take them, answer both. The first one is I certainly understand the emotions involved. What I think we have a responsibility to do is to acknowledge that taking donation out of the scenario, families have an angry response to the loss of control during end-of-life scenarios about someone they care very deeply about, and our first instinct is to protect those we love. So the anger is not always towards donation, it's to the loss and to the loss of control. And that's where Pam spoke about our responsibility to navigate that process in the front end through huddles, and effective communication can help prepare us to deal with that initial response. There's nothing that we're going to do to mitigate that response. It's the only response they have to give in that moment. There's nothing else that they can have. The second question about the perception that we're asking a family to sign authorization, and when there is a scenario where it's a known donor FPA, we do a disclosure versus an authorization with our families to make sure that they acknowledge we've disclosed to them the donation process, the fact that their loved one had designated themselves a donor, and we're going to move forward. Any authorizations would only be for things that are outside of the OPO's ability to perform based on regulations. So anything that involved testing before death was declared, the OPO doesn't have the right. The family needs to provide consent for that. Any medications involved in the process, those are all things where a consent would be appropriate from the family.
On that note, do families have to actually sign a paper that they've been disclosed?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's more of acknowledgement of the disclosure rather than that they are consenting or authorizing.
Correct. And there are situations if the family is unwilling to sign that disclosure or to participate in the donation process, then Karen can talk about kind of the process map we would follow to identify whether this is a case where we would still acknowledge that someone had made a designation.
Just to clarify, if a patient had not designated themselves as a donor, and the family is going to be approached for organ donation, that terminology would be a authorization
Correct.
rather than a disclosure.
Correct.
And they're seeking permission of the family. Do you want to have the organs of your loved one donated?
Correct. And just one last thing before I pass the mic, I think it's also important for everyone in this room to understand that from an infinite legacy standpoint, we view all of those families the same. So a family where there's a known designation or an unknown designation, our goal is to collaborate with the hospital to care for that family. The difference is that we have dual advocacy when there's an FPA, because we also need to speak for the individual who designated their wishes. Yes, ma'am.
Some question about, in this case, the father raised questions about the circumstances under which his son designated himself as a donor. Talk to us about what would be the justifiable reasons for overriding a previous designation.
Yeah, I think Karen and I were very limited in our slide presentation because we didn't want to take it over, but the legal guidance around first person authorization is very clear. The only person that can amend their decision is the individual that made the decision. So our family services team are trained to engage families in discussion to identify whether a family is saying, well, we don't believe in donation, or I would never be a donor, versus the individual who very clearly stated that I no longer want to be an organ donor. And the law actually is very clear and asks us to identify disinterested parties who would know that this person amended their decision.
And are people who designate aware of the process for amending their decisions?
Yes and no. I think that people are aware of the concept that they are making a decision to donate. If you're asking me to declare that everyone understands everything that that means in terms of end-of-life process and testing and what organs are going to recover, that type of education is not happening at point of registration or at the DMV. What Infinite Legacy does through our community outreach, through our hospital education, is to add that background.
I would say the general public does not know that it is irrevocable. And when a minor signs to get their license at age 16, I'm not sure that they have any idea that at 16 years of age that that will last for the rest of their life for as long as they have that license. Or they never get another license, but they were initially registered. It is still intact. But I don't think people know that. Now, am I okay with that? I think it means that there will be the occasional situation where a family provides a situation, we've had it actually, where we have to consider whether they were guided to make a decision that wasn't really an informed decision of their own. And we did not proceed in that case. So there are always circumstances, but I think the seriousness of one declaring that they would like to be a donor and their own autonomous decision should almost always be honored, but there are always exceptions. I think there needs to be a much better public campaign about this, not only the positives, but the whole story.
And just really quick, because Pam's statement reminded me of a case that we had within the last 90 days in our service area that met this exact scenario where a mother had taken the child to get a driver's license, and that child along the way had expressed that that wasn't his decision, that he was pretty much doing that at the behest of his mother. And so that revocation was honored, again, understanding that it reflected the individual who made the decision was amending their decision. And so our family services team spends a lot of time learning to engage in those discussions so that they are able to pull that out if that's the case.
I'll turn to Jeff first. So let's say the clinicians in this case called you in risk management and concerned that the family's distraught. They want to try to figure out how to navigate the situation. What advice would you be giving to the clinical team?
Well, can you guys hear me? First, I was wondering why the lawyer was sitting at this table, because everybody here is so well apprised of the law. Just for, if you ever want to read it, by the way, it's in the Estates and Trust article, it's Title IV. And it's more weedsy than the Healthcare Decisions Act. So it's much more complicated than we were trying to withdraw and withhold support, just FYI. Because there's a lot of provisions in there about amending, revoking, changing it and creating an anatomical gift. It's really complicated. And in fact, the priority list in the Estates and Trust article is even deeper than in the Healthcare Decisions Act when we talk about getting informed consent for patients. So it's really fact-based. It's really depending upon a whole bunch of different criteria. We don't have enough time actually here to go over all of that. But here we would have to look at the legal criteria for amending, revoking, and all of that stuff, and who has the right to do it, and the authority to do it. We did have a case here, actually, I wouldn't say it was maybe about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, where there was an issue of a group within the same class that said that they wanted to revoke it. And we had to walk through the analysis of the law to determine if that was possible under the circumstances. So again, like here, for instance, we would have to walk through what that algorithm is to determine if it would be legally permissible to do that under the circumstances. That's where we would get involved. And there's one other thing I want to throw out there, and I'll pass it on the mic, is in my career at Johns Hopkins as an attorney, if you had to guess how many complaints or suits or surveys we've had about organ donation, if you had to guess, how many would you think that would be? Zero. Now, related to this topic, not related to this topic and clinically based, there's one claim in the last 20 years. So that's a huge testament to everything that all of the clinicians do and Infinite Legacy does to prep people for making sure that we're following the law and making sure that we're doing what's right by both the patient and the families. So it's a real stunning testament, because I got to tell you, that's not true in some areas, other areas of the law when it comes to medical malpractice claims, and that every health system is the same. So it's not just Johns Hopkins. But I'll stop there.
Maybe we could walk through the algorithm that Infinite Legacy might go through. I don't know that people can see it, but you can talk us through it.
Yeah. Imagine, yes. So I think this ties very closely to, as we've been talking about this case, I know you can't really see it. So for Infinite Legacy, like the hospital, we have an ethics committee, at the organ procurement organization. We have a senior leader group that includes Penny, myself, and several others. And we have a council, as you all do. And what we've developed is what we call our senior leadership algorithm. And it really walks through the deliberative, considered steps that we would take, just as Jeff is outlining. Say, for example, if there's an opposition, what's the genesis of it? Is it what we term, Jeff, like donor centric? Is it about the donor, as in, they made a verbal revocation, all those things that we're talking about. And I know you can't see, but if you could see, resonant all through it is the partnership with the hospital, those on the unit, as well as when indicated, consulting with legal and ethics at the hospital and for Infinite Legacy. And sometimes pause, right? Let's pause, fact base, all the things that we're talking about right now. So we did want to share this. We share the attention to detail, the care for families and the donors, and all that is a testament to the work that you do and doing that in partnership. We have utilized this several times. And as Kenny mentioned and Dr. Lip said, it's very rare and every case is unique. So we evaluate each on their merits. That's helpful.
Comments and concerns coming from the team often leading a lot of these conversations. I'm one of the MICU providers. Totally agree with the decoupling that Dr. Lipset and others echoed of the two conversations. It can be exquisitely hard to do that at times. A lot of times, part of the conversation about end of life and making those decisions involves conversations about what that looks like, including, can the granddaughter be here? Can all 10 cousins be in the room? Is it going to be here in this room? Can we play music? Things like that. So it's going to be hard to answer those questions truthfully, knowing or not knowing what their donor status is maybe at that time, but hopefully we will, and not knowing exactly what the limitations might be. So I worry about that. The other thing that I worry about is, it was mentioned in the case study, we haven't talked about it yet, but the delay in withdrawing care. So you're talking days of maybe further testing in the interim. It might not happen at a convenient hour for families to be here. We have a lot of under-resourced families who have transportation issues, who can't take time off work, they're paid hourly, they rely on public transit, all of those things that factor in. And I would hate to further marginalize otherwise marginalized communities and not have them be present for their loved one's death. So not really questions, but kind of
Well,
comments.
I have a couple of comments is, once a decision to be a donor is out in the open and is agreed upon, whatever the family needs is what we focus on. In this case, if they want to have a huge family, no problem. We have withdrawn life-sustaining therapy in many different locations. It does not have to be in the operating room. It can be in the recovery room. It can be in any private place that's necessary for the particular circumstance. And we've done this. This isn't just blowing smoke. We have done this. We have expedited time when that is an issue for a family. And as Karen said earlier, when some families need additional family members to come and they want days, they're not ready to actually withdraw life-sustaining therapy. and they want to do it a week from Saturday, for example. And so I think the team really finds out what is important for the closure. How should it happen? There are always honor guards that happen no matter what time of the day or night it is. And we make every effort. The one thing we're not in full control of, although we do have priority, is in the operating room. And organ donors have a priority in the operating room, but there are emergencies that occasionally disrupt the timing. But we really make every effort to make it work for the families for the reasons you appropriately brought up. It's really important.
I want to thank you for that feedback and just kind of give two things for consideration. The first thing is that Infinite Legacy serves 68 hospitals in our service area. Only 5 have what we call an in-house coordinator, and we have a unique relationship with Hopkins where they have assigned an individual that is available almost immediately in most situations. And what that allows us to do is to kind of be involved early to not completely mitigate, but certainly manage some of that process and to begin to address some of the potential needs for a family. The second thing for everyone to consider, and I appreciate this both as someone from a minority community, I think that I can always appreciate, and I know the history of Hopkins, the consideration of the community. And how do we engage in discussions that balance that? Because every missed donation opportunity also impacts that same community. And so when we have someone, especially from a minority community, who's done the work to make a decision to register and actually took action to be a donor, understanding how it impacts our community, because that's what our community outreach is talking about, is that minority donors, because of genetic matching, may wait longer than non-minorities. So please register to help your community. And then we don't honor that, then we've also kind of undermined that courageous decision that that person made. 31 years ago, when I entered this field, and my grandparents and my great-grandparents were alive, their feelings about donation were not going to support my designation, right? And that's why I did it. It was before we had registries and had to carry a donor card around. So balancing that, I think, is where we have an opportunity as an OPO and a hospital to work on strategies to deal with the challenges in the process, but also exercise that dual advocacy.
In every single case like this, where there's opposition, my number one goal is to work with the team, work with the family, work with the family services coordinator to seek to understand, to figure out what's there for them. And to figure out, is it a timing thing? Is it a, they changed their mind thing, or what's the root cause? Because there's so much that we cannot control, but then there's a lot that we can. The fastest that I've ever gotten to the OR was 3 hours. So if, and that requires a lot of communication. But ultimately it is a family driven process. You know, it starts when that family makes the decision to withdraw life-sustaining therapies. And I truly view this as advocating for them in whatever way. Like Dr. Lipset said, we have done the withdrawal of life-sustaining therapies in numerous different locations. I've had more than 10 people in an OR before. What I just need is time to have those big conversations, and it's a lot of bold requests, but it's not scenarios that would happen frequently. I try to hold my political capital with the OR for times when I really need it, and be incredibly sensitive to when family can be present, if that is something that is important to them. So I will always advocate for that.
And so legally, we have a disjunction with circulatory and neurological criteria. I got a driver's license last month, and the lady was like, "You'll see a question on the next screen." And I said, "Cool." And the screen isn't like, you know, since the UDDA, 1978. The screen is like, "I affirm I want to be doing this. It doesn't say that like the definition is weird or contentious or that cases like this can happen. And so in a case like this, how can we look at this and be like, this is informed consent to put the family through this? When people aren't even aware that death itself is defined this way.
I'm gonna let somebody else answer this question, but I think Cinda touched on this beforehand. I would love the feds to have a nationwide campaign about organ donation. I think that would really help our cause.
I'll probably leave Karen to clean this up, but I think that Infinite Legacy, as part of our community outreach, works with the DMVs. But the DMV is the endpoint, and in a perfect world, our engagement in our schools and our community outreach has kind of prepared someone to act on that opportunity. And so I think that there are very few people who are in the DMV, and that's the first time they've heard about organ donation. Our focused outreach in marginal communities has intensified. You know, we are engaging those people and providing that education on the ground about what this process means, what donor designation means. And so hopefully by the time that you're there, that's just a confirmation of an earlier discussion. But I have said for 30 years that if the federal government, and excuse me for editorializing for a moment, but if the federal government really wanted to solve part of this problem, because there are enough organ donors to solve the wait list, then it would provide the OPOs with the resources. But OPOs always start out with one limiting statement, which is we are the non-profit federally designated organ procurement organization. Code word, we don't have unlimited resources to do that. Okay.
I think what Kenny said, I think it's with many things, there's an and and an and, right? So you bring up an excellent point. And the efforts at public education here and across the United States, you know, Kenny and I've been, I think we might start the same day, is ever expanding, and we all collectively seek to do more. And we all make decisions about, I don't say this lightly, we all make decisions about things every day. And on some level, we determine the scope of what we want to understand and know about something as we make that decision. And so we all seek to act in good faith when someone has made that decision to designate that we honor that. And coming full circle, continuing to do everything we can to have public education and information about donation, for sure.
Question regarding triage. How do you triage a crisis like this? And then how is the family supported through JHA's protocol?
Is that an OPO standpoint? Or
Hospital standpoint. You can speak on both.
I can't speak on the hospital.
Well, yeah, you're with Infinite Legacy, whoever,
So if there's a case that we think that there's going to be an opposition for whatever scenario, I would hope that our family advocates were involved and we're also bringing this to my attention. I would work with the medical team, and we would definitely kind of escalate through our chain of command. So we would reach out to legal and risk and ethics to make sure that they are guiding how we move forward, that what we are doing is both within the ethical constraints, but is also legally permissible. And then from, I think the second part of your question was about supporting that family. And I think that that's where our family advocacy program is really, really important because there's so many things that might be said to families in a family meeting, and they're still processing, and they might share that with somebody else. So I found typically when I was working bedside that could be, you know, a chaplain, a family advocate, a bedside nurse, that if anybody hears something that would be concerning, we need to come together as a group to figure out how can we support this family in their meaningful closure. And what does that look like? Does that look like having neuro come and speak with them about the prognosis? Does that look like taking some additional time? Is that, getting a lawyer involved? What does that look like? And it's different for each and every single family. But at the core of it, everything that we do should be to support this family through the loss of their loved one.
And Anna and I are trying to figure out a way to have palliative partner a little more with Infant Legacy and not as a representative for Infant Legacy, but for us, our group to understand how we can help in this situation and how we can prepare families for these conversations, even though we don't bring it up, we're not an advocate of it, we're just there as a advocate of the family, but what is our role to help with these conversations? Because we may be privy to the previous family meetings weeks ago, or know who the plans are, or what their concerns are, and kind of talking and helping with the conversations and supporting it as well.
Exactly. And I think it all gets back to being proactive. You guys know one thing that I really miss from bedside is being able to make my own assessments of families and of clinical things that are happening because I'm right there. You guys are my eyes and my ears. In order for the program to be successful, or in order for us to really truly meet these families where they're at and offer donation at an appropriate time, coming together. So if there is an identified family meeting, if there is an inkling that a family might be starting to make those decisions, please let me know early. So then that way we can get that assessment done. And we can have a conversation when the time is right, right people, right place, right time, and also take, medical suitability into account. Because ultimately we want this to be a dignified and compassionate death and honor donation, if that individual has made that decision working with the family's timeframes.
Just the last question.
Sorry, my question is both for Jeff and probably Kenny can answer. There are ways that religious objections are sustained or entertained in cases of brain death in states like New Jersey, Michigan, and Illinois. But when it comes to FPA, how does the religious objections weigh in? I can create a situation, I'm an Indian Christian who completely opposes cremation because it's pagan. It's a Hindu practice. If my family endorses for FPA regulations, God forbid if that situation arises for me, there is a disclosure that reads, any bodily parts that are waste that will be cremated. So rather my family would go to court saying that we do not want cremation, we would not make my loved one as a donor. So how does that would be kind of reviewed and weighed by the OPO? If it comes to NRP, perfusion itself becomes a big question because blood itself is life. So all these religious questions, whether it would be weighed or there are ways to entertain the religious objections.
I'm going to give it to Karen, but I'm going to tell you where that discussion starts. I think in any situation, there's a tendency to react to the emotion of the situation, and it's the 10-second rule and to step back. And then to that same algorithm that we would follow in an FPA is the same algorithm. And it's going to be Jeff and our legal and our senior leaders trying to figure out how we adhere to the law. I think it's important for everyone to understand first person authorization is not an infinite legacy piece of legislation, right? It's codified in the UAGA, and the Organ Procurement Organization is following that law just as well as any other state and federal laws that are on the books. And so when these situations arise, it's not infinite legacy advocating on one side or another of an issue. It's us working with the hospital to ensure both of us are operating in a risk-free or risk-reduced environment when it comes to this situation. That
was excellent. John, that's a really great but tough question, because the question we usually get is the families denying the patients died. And that's a struggle because when you talk about neurological criteria or brain death, for instance, or the law is very specific about death. And often we have to just say, well, death is death. There's no alternative. Brain dead is dead. And so when it comes to exactly what Kenny was saying, we follow the same kind of rules that are in the Maryland statute, for instance, which mirrors the federal one, is very weedsy when it comes to the algorithm about opposing donation, revoking, amending, and all of those things. And what we would do is just run the algorithm to determine what I usually ask myself without blathering anymore is must you, can you, should you? So anybody that's asked me for legal advice in the last 18 years will get the same kind of 3 questions back. Must you, can you, should you? Are you required to do this thing or prevented from doing this thing? Yes or no? Can you do this thing or can you not do this thing? Yes or no? And if the answer is you can, then the question is should you? And that's the ethical question. And that's usually when I start calling Mark and Cindy and you and other people too. So there is a marriage between the OPO, the hospital's liability exposure, and what the family and the patient want and need. What Karen said earlier was, it really is case by case, and because it gets so weedsy fast about the nuances. And then the last thing I'll say is, we get between 300 and 500 legal calls every month. Every 4 weeks, requests for advice, whether it's email, secure chat, carrier pigeon. I mean, they come in from everywhere. I have never been called about this situation in my career here. I've been called about other similar nuances about death and the Healthcare Decisions Act. But these guys are running an amazing program, both internally and externally. So it's a real testament to how we're following the law.
Perhaps we'll have that as the final comment. So thank you all for coming today. We look forward to seeing you next month.